My family only invited me to the reunion to humiliate me by bragging about my cousin's new job. They had no idea he was my new employee. So I let them talk, all the way until my aunt called me a failure in front of everyone. So I just smiled, waited for silence, and said the 4 words that ended his career and her reputation forever. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The email arrived at 10:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, glowing with a cruel blue light on the laptop screen balanced on my knees. I was 3 days into the worst flu I'd had in a decade, cocooned in a fortress of used tissues and half-empty mugs of tea. My head felt like a pressurized cabin, and my body ached in places I didn't know could ache. The email wasn't from my team, who were holding down the fort while I finalized our London expansion. It was from my mother. The subject line was deceptively simple: "Vance family reunion, you must come." I groaned, the sound scraping my raw throat. I hadn't attended a full family reunion in 4 years. Not since the one where my Aunt Carol had cornered me by the potato salad and asked, in a stage whisper that carried across the entire backyard, if my little computer hobby was still paying my rent. At the time, I had just secured my first round of Series A funding. I'd mumbled something about staying busy and fled. This time, the email's contents were far more direct. It was a forwarded message from Aunt Carol herself, a woman who weaponized enthusiasm in a way that always left me feeling small. "Dearest family," it began, "I am just thrilled to announce that this year's reunion at my home, of course, will be an extra special celebration. As you all know, my brilliant Jason has just landed the most incredible, life-changing job. It's a 6-figure starting position with a massive international firm. Bonuses, stock options, the works. He is just soaring. We are so proud." I closed my eyes. Jason, my cousin, golden boy Jason. For as long as I could remember, Jason was the standard bide which all other family members were measured and found wanting. Jason got a B on a calculus final? He's just so stressed, the boy is a genius. Jason crashed his dad's car? He has such quick reflexes, he managed to avoid hitting the mailbox. The email continued. "I know it's last minute, but we must celebrate him. And of course, it's a wonderful chance for all of us to catch up and see what everyone's been up to." A cold dread, sharper than my fever, settled in my stomach. I knew exactly what seeing what everyone's been up to meant. It was a performance. A curated show where Jason was the star, and I, Erin Vance, was the audience-planted cautionary tale. The quiet, nerdy girl who did computer stuff and, at 32, was still unmarried, childless, and, in their eyes, utterly ambitionless. The last line of my mother's personal note, however, was what twisted the knife. "Please come, Erin. Aunt Carol specifically asked if you were coming. She said she worries about you. Just show your face for an afternoon, for me." Worries about me? That was the code. The polite, family-friendly way of saying they wanted to put me on display to make Jason's success shine even brighter. I looked from the email to the other document open on my laptop, a PDF waiting for my final digital signature. It was the onboarding package for the new Q4 cohort of senior strategy analysts for my company, Vance Meridian. My gaze drifted down the list of names until it landed on the third one. Miller Jason, start date, Monday. A slow, cold smile spread across my face, cracking the dry skin on my lips. My company, the little computer hobby they all dismissed, was the massive international firm Jason was joining. The firm I had built from nothing in my studio apartment, the firm whose logo was deliberately nondescript, the firm I had intentionally kept my name off of in all public-facing materials, preferring to let the work speak for itself. Jason, in his arrogance, had clearly not researched the board or the CEO. He just saw the 6-figure salary and the impressive title. I hit reply on my mother's email. "You know what, Mom? You're right, I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it for the world." I took a long drink of cold, bitter tea. My headache was suddenly a little better. They wanted a show. I would give them one. but they had forgotten one crucial thing about me. They had forgotten that the quiet, nerdy girl was the one who always did her homework. And this time, I was more prepared than they could ever imagine. The betrayal wasn't just the setup, it was the years of being underestimated. And that, I decided, was a debt I was finally ready to collect. The 2 weeks between that email and the reunion were a blur of closing. The London deal and fighting the dregs of my flu. My CFO, David, a man who believed understated was a synonym for weak, had been begging me for years to do a PR push. "Aaron, no one knows who you are," he'd argued over a video call, his image buffering slightly. "Vance Meridian is a ghost. We're pulling in 9 figures, and the Times thinks we're a mid-level data processor in Ohio. You need to be on a cover. A conference, something." "David, we're not a ghost. We're discreet," I'd countered, my voice still raspy. "Our clients don't hire us for flashy PR. They hire us because we're the silent engine that fixes their billion-dollar logistical nightmares. They like that we're not splashy." "Fine," he'd sighed. "But one day you're going to want that recognition, and you're going to wish you'd built the platform." I thought about that call as I drove my 5-year-old, unassuming sedan toward Aunt Carol's sprawling new-build house in the suburbs. I had intentionally left my Tesla, the one I'd bought myself as a congratulations for paying off my startup loans, at home. Today was not a day for flash. It was a day for camouflage. I parked 3 blocks away and walked, allowing the humid July air to settle on me. I wanted to look exactly as they expected me to look, slightly tired, slightly rumpled, and entirely unremarkable. As I rounded the corner, the house came into view. It was a monument to beige stucco, with a 3-car garage and a lawn so aggressively green it looked artificial. A giant, professionally printed banner flapped lazily over the entryway. "Congratulations, Jason. The future is yours." I took a deep breath and rang the bell. The door was pulled open by Aunt Carol herself, who enveloped me in a cloud of expensive perfume and hairspray. "Aaron, you made it. Oh, you poor dear, you look exhausted." It was the opening salvo, not "how are you," but an immediate confirmation of my presumed failure. "Just a little tired from work, Aunt Carol," I said, forcing a smile. "Oh, of course, your little job. Well, come in, come in. Everyone is just dying to see you." The house was packed. The air was thick with the smell of catered barbecue and the dull roar of relatives trying to talk over one another. I was immediately passed from aunt to uncle, each one giving me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder and a variation of the same comment. "Still with that computer thing, Aaron? Good to see good to see you. Don't you worry, dear, your time will come." Each comment was a small paper cut, a deliberate reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. I just smiled, nodded, and kept my eyes peeled for the man of the hour. I found him holding court by the pool. Jason was, I had to admit, the picture of success. He wore a salmon-colored polo shirt, crisp linen shorts, and a watch that was aggressively shiny. He was surrounded by adoring aunts, all hanging on his every word as he gestured broadly. "And the VP of Global Strategy, he tells me, 'Jason, we're not just looking for analysts, we're looking for visionaries.' It's an incredible synergy. The potential for disruption is massive." I almost choked on my lemonade. Synergy? Disruption? He was parroting the exact keywords from the orientation handbook I had personally written 5 years ago. He finally spotted me. "Aaron, hey, long time no see, how's everything?" That was Jason's signature move. The vague, dismissive everything that implied my life was too small to contain any details worth asking about. "Busy," I said, keeping my smile firmly in place. Same old, but wow, Jason, this sounds incredible. A life-changing job. I heard it's with a massive international firm." He puffed up instantly. "Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. Vance Meridian, you've probably never heard of them. They're very exclusive." "Vance Meridian," I repeated, tasting the name. "No, doesn't ring a bell, but it sounds very impressive. Congratulations." Thanks, he said, already losing interest and scanning the crowd for someone more important to talk to. Hey, I think they're still hiring for, like, data entry or something. I could probably put in a good word for you, get you out of that freelance stuff you do. The freelance stuff. I was the founder and CEO. He was, technically, my subordinate. The urge to laugh was so strong it was almost painful. That's so thoughtful, Jason, I said, my voice sweet. I'll definitely think about it. Aunt Carol swept in, handing her son a beer. Don't bother him with small-time stuff, Aaron. My Jason is on a rocket to the moon. She turned her beaming smile on him, then looked back at me, her expression tightening into one of pity. It's just wonderful. A real career. Security. A future. He'll be a millionaire before he's 30. She then leaned in, her perfume making my eyes water, and delivered the line she'd been saving all day. Unlike some people. I ate. Held her gaze. I didn't flinch, I just smiled. You must be so proud, Aunt Carol. Oh, I am, she said, pulling back, clearly disappointed I hadn't taken the bait. Now, if you'll excuse us, Arthur is about to make a toast. Do try to look happy, dear. As she led Jason away, I let my smile drop. The rocket to the moon was about to hit some unexpected turbulence, because they had all forgotten one crucial thing. I was the one who had built the launch pad, and I was the only one who had the codes. To understand Aunt Carol, you have to understand the Vance family hierarchy. We weren't old money, but we were old pride. The family was built on the stoic, hardworking legacy of my grandfather, Arthur Morgan, a man who had turned a small woodworking shop into a moderately successful regional furniture business. He valued sweat, calluses, and tangible results. My father and his sister, Carol, were different. My father was quiet, content to be a high school history teacher, a profession grandfather Arthur respected for its stability, if not its ambition. Aunt Carol, however, had married a man who made a quick buck in real estate and had been desperately trying to rebrand the Vances as high-flying socialites ever since. For Carol, success wasn't about achievement, it was about perception. It was the zip code, the brand of the car, and the title on the business card. And I, in her eyes, was a catastrophic failure on all three fronts. I was the odd one, the daughter of the quiet history teacher. While Jason was playing quarterback, I was in my room learning to code in C++. While he was going to frat parties, I was building a database management system for a local nonprofit. My father had encouraged it. It's where your mind works, Aaron, he'd said. Don't ever let anyone tell you that's not valuable. But when my father passed away from a sudden heart attack during my sophomore year of college, my anchor was gone. My mother, bless her, was lost in her own grief. And Aunt Carol descended. I remember her coming to our house, ostensibly to help, but really to pass judgment. She'd walk through my father's study, where I'd set up my fledgling coding business, and tusk at the clutter. Aaron, honey, she'd said, picking up a server component, I know you're sad, but you can't just hide in here with these toys. You're 20 years old. You should be out meeting people, interning at a real company. Like Jason is at his father's firm. How will you ever find a husband if you smell like soldering iron? That was the crux of it. My failure wasn't just professional, it was personal. I wasn't following the script. When I dropped out of my prestigious university a year later, a decision that nearly broke me, it was because my little computer hobby had just received a $1.5 million seed investment. I couldn't do both, but I didn't tell them that. I couldn't. How could I explain venture capital to a woman who thought stock was something you bought at the supermarket? I just said, I'm starting my own business. The family's reaction was predictable. My grandfather looked disappointed, my mother wrung her hands, and Aunt Carol looked triumphant. I had confirmed her every prediction. I was the dropout, the weirdo, the failure. Well, she'd said with a tight, pitying smile, we all have our own path. I'm sure your father's pension will help until you get on your feet. I never corrected her. I let her believe it. I let her believe that for the next 10 years. I let her believe I was a struggling freelancer. I let her think I was just getting by. It was easier. It was my armor. While she was busy bragging about Jason getting a corner office at his dad's tiny real estate firm, I was quietly building Vance Meridian. I built it on the principles my father had taught me: integrity, precision, and silence. We didn't advertise. We acquired clients through word of mouth. We were the company that governments and Fortune 500s called when their systems were broken, their data was compromised, or their logistics were in chaos. My team and I flew to Zurich, to Tokyo, to London. We were the best, and we were invisible. And now, standing by Aunt Carol's chlorine-scented pool, I was watching the antagonist I had created in its full, glorious bloom. She had spent a decade cultivating this narrative of my failure, and today was meant to be her victory lap. She had trapped me, or so she thought. She had gathered the entire family as witnesses, but as I watched her preen, I realized she wasn't just an antagonist. She was a caricature. A woman so blinded by her own shallow definition of success that she couldn't see the truth even as it was preparing to serve her a drink. Aunt Carol clinked a spoon against a wine glass. A toast, everyone gather round. The murmur of the crowd died down. She climbed up onto the patio step, beaming, with Jason at her side. "Thank you all for coming," she trilled. "It's so wonderful to have the whole family together, especially to celebrate my brilliant, brilliant boy." She reached out and pinched Jason's cheek. He looked embarrassed, but pleased. "As you all know," she continued, her voice rising in volume, "Jason has just accepted a position at one of the most prestigious firms in the country, a leader in global strategy. It's a job that people dream of, a job for leaders." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed, with surgical precision, on me. "It just goes to show," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity, "what happens when you have focus, when you have ambition, when you don't just give up and settle." The air grew thick. I could feel my mother's hand twitching on her glass. Several cousins looked down at their shoes. This was it, the public execution. "We are just so proud of him. He's going to be a millionaire before he's 30, you mark my words." She raised her glass. "To Jason, the future of the Vance family." "To Jason," the family echoed. As the cheer died down, Carol kept her hand on Jason's shoulder. Her smile was sharp. "Oh, and Aaron," she called out, as if she just remembered I was there. "We're all so glad you could make it, dear. We haven't heard from you at all. What have you been up to?" The question hung in the air, a perfectly crafted weapon. What have you been up to? This was the moment, the turning point. For 10 years, my answer had been a shield. "Oh, you know, this and that. Just keeping busy. Same old, same old." I had stayed a passive victim because it was easier than fighting a battle I didn't think I could win. But standing there, with the sting of my aunt's public insult still sharp, something inside me didn't just break, it hardened. My father's voice echoed in my head, "Don't ever let anyone tell you that's not valuable." I was done being their cautionary tale. I took a deliberate step forward, pulling the focus of the 50-odd family members directly to me. I let the silence stretch, just a second or two longer than was comfortable. "Actually, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying easily across the patio. "It's funny you should ask." I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes. This wasn't in the script. I was supposed to mumble and look away. I've been incredibly busy," I continued, letting my eyes drift from her to my cousin. "That London expansion I was working on finally went through. It was a nightmare of logistics, but we got it done." I heard a few confused murmurs. "London," my mother whispered. Aunt Carol's smile twitched. "London, oh how nice, a little vacation, dear." "Not exactly," I said. "It was for work, for my company, Vance Meridian." I let the name land. I watched as it registered on Jason's face. His tan seemed to pale by several shades. His smile froze, then collapsed. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening horror. He knew. "What?" Aunt Carol snapped, looking back and forth between us. "What did you say?" "Vance Meridian," I repeated, louder this time. My company, the little computer hobby I started in my dorm room, it's grown. Jason was shaking his head, a tiny, desperate motion. No, that's not possible. The CEO is, the board, I researched. You researched the public-facing board, Jason, I said gently. You didn't research the private holding company that owns 100% of the stock. VM Holdings. Vance, Morgan, my father's name and my grandfather's. I am the sole proprietor and CEO. The trap wasn't just my silence. The trap was my name, the name they had spent my entire life dismissing. The name Vance. The very name Jason had been so proud to be associated with, never once making the connection. But you, Aunt Carol stammered. She was a shark that had just been told the ocean was, in fact, a small pond. She was completely out of her depth. Aaron, you're a freelancer. I am, I agreed. I am free to lance wherever I choose. This week it was London. Last month it was a server farm in Iceland. Next month it's the annual board meeting in New York. This isn't funny, Aaron, Carol shrieked, her voice cracking. Jason, tell her this is a joke. But Jason was mute. He was staring at me as if he'd seen a ghost. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd spent the last month bragging about being hired to wash the car of the woman he'd been mocking. This was the moment where I could have stopped. I could have let the shock sink in, but I knew my aunt, I knew the family. Shock would wear off. It would be twisted into a story of my arrogance. I needed more than shock. I needed proof. You know, Jason, I said, walking closer to him, my voice dropping into a conversational tone. I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I was concerned when your file came across my desk. This was it, the investigation. I hadn't just seen his name on the list. The moment I saw his application, I had done what I do best. I ran a full diagnostic. I didn't hire a pie. I didn't need one. I am the pie. My company's entire business is built on finding the truth in data. Your file, Jason whispered, his voice hoarse. I said, pulling out my phone. Your resume, it's very impressive. Summa cum laude from your university. Intern of the year at your father's firm. Head of regional development for 3 years. See, Aunt Carol crowed, finding her footing. He's brilliant. He is, I said. He's a brilliant, creative writer. I turned my phone screen toward my grandfather, who had been watching all of this with a dark, unreadable expression. I was curious, I said, my voice ringing with cold, hard clarity. So I made a few calls. That summa cum laude, he was 40 credits short. He didn't even graduate. He withdrew due to personal reasons after his fraternity was suspended for cheating on finals. The Intern of the Year award, it was from his father's firm. He was the only intern. And head of regional development? Jason, your father's firm is a 2-person office above a dry cleaner. The region you developed was the new territory for the office coffee machine. A collective gasp sucked the air from the patio. Every eye was on Jason, whose face was now a mottled, terrified red. You, he stammered. You can't, that's HR, that's confidential. It is, I agreed. It's confidential company information, and as the CEO, I have a right to know who I'm hiring, or, in this case, who I'm not. Aunt Carol lunged forward. You're lying, you're a liar, you've always been a jealous, bitter little. Aunt Carol, I said, my voice like ice, stop talking. And she froze. You are accusing me of lying about falsified corporate documents. You are doing it in front of 50 people, including my own legal counsel, who is probably my second cousin, but I'm not sure. But more importantly, I said, turning to Jason, you're trying to defend a man who committed resume fraud to gain a 6-figure position at a multinational corporation. I looked at Jason. The golden boy was gone. In his place was a terrified 28-year-old who had just been caught. You lied on your application, Jason, I said softly. To my company, that's a federal offense. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the hum of the pool filter. Aunt Carol looked like she'd been struck. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Jason was physically trembling, his eyes wide with panic. A federal offense, my mother whispered, her hand flying to her chest. Misrepresenting credentials to a publicly traded, or in my case, soon-to-be, federally contracted corporation is a very serious matter, I said, not taking my eyes off Jason. It's not just fudging a resume, Jason, it's fraud. This was the first major confrontation. I had laid the groundwork, and now I was revealing the first layer of the truth. I had expected denial. I had expected anger. What I got was desperation. I mean, everyone does it. Jason blurted out, his voice cracking. It's not a big deal, it's just, marketing. Aunt Carol, seeing her son's pathetic defense, snapped back to life. But her usual bluster was gone, replaced by a brittle, panicked rage. He's right, how dare you come here and attack my son, you're jealous, you've always been jealous of him. Jealous? I asked, a genuine, mirthless laugh escaping me. Jealous of what exactly, Aunt Carol? His fake degree? His imaginary job history? Or the fact that he was so arrogant he applied to a company with our family name in its private charter and didn't even notice? He got the job, didn't he? She shrieked. You hired him, that's what matters. You said it yourself, his file was on your desk. He passed the first-round algorithm, which just screens for keywords, I explained, as if I were talking to a child. He was then interviewed by a junior HR manager who, frankly, I will be having a very serious talk with on Monday. He was approved pending final executive review. My review. The review I was conducting when I got your email. I turned my full attention back to Jason, who had shrunk under his mother's defense. You didn't just lie, Jason, I said, my voice quiet but carrying. You were sloppy, and at my company we don't tolerate sloppy. It's a logistical security firm, cousin. Sloppiness gets people hurt. Sloppiness costs millions. Sloppiness in our world is not an option. Aaron, he pleaded, finally looking me in the eye. It was the first time he had ever looked at me like I was his equal, let alone his superior. Aaron, please, I can explain. It was my mom, she. Don't you dare, Aunt Carol hissed, grabbing his arm. Don't you dare blame me, Jason Miller. I did everything for you. I made you. You made a fraud, Carol. A new voice boomed, cutting through the tension like a circular saw. Every head turned. My grandfather, Arthur Morgan, was on his feet. He was a tall man, still imposing at 78, and he was staring at his daughter with a look of such profound disappointment and fury that Aunt Carol physically recoiled. He had been silent until now, observing from his chair at the head of the table. The patriarch had finally spoken. Arthur, Carol began. Be quiet, he commanded. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The patio was silent. He walked slowly, his cane thumping on the stone, until he was standing in the middle of the circle between me and my aunt. He looked at Jason. Did you lie on the application? Jason's face crumpled. He looked at his mother, then at the ground. I exaggerated, a little. The degree, did you graduate summa cum laude? Arthur pressed. No, sir. The words were barely audible. Did you graduate at all? No, sir. Grandfather Arthur closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them, he wasn't looking at Jason. He was looking at Carol. You, he said, and the word was full of gravel and steel. You did this. You pushed this boy, your son, to be a billboard for your own vanity. You valued the sound of success so much, you forgot to teach him the work of it. Father, that's not fair, Carol cried. I just wanted him to have the best. I wanted him to be someone, not like. She stopped, but her venomous glance in my direction finished the sentence. Not like Aaron, I finished for her, my voice flat. Yes, she shrieked, all pretense of control gone. Not like you. Hiding in your room, playing with computers with no husband, no children, no life. I wanted more for my son. And what did you get, Carol? Grandfather Arthur's voice was deathly quiet. You got a liar. You got a fraud who was about to be arrested." "Arrested?" Jason yelped, his panic turning shrill. "Aaron, you wouldn't. We're family." Ah, there it was. The final, desperate card to play. Family. The word they had used as a bludgeon against me for 20 years was now being offered as a shield for him. I looked at him, at his terrified, pleading face, and for the first time I didn't feel anger. I felt tired. "Family," I repeated. "That's a very interesting word. You're right, Jason, we are family. And as family, I was prepared to handle this quietly. I was going to call you tomorrow, before your start date. I was going to tell you that your offer was rescinded due to the discrepancies in your application. I was going to give you a very stern, very private lecture about fraud and integrity." I paused, letting the was hang in the air. "But that was before this," I said, gesturing to the stunned crowd. "That was before your mother gathered the entire family to watch her humiliate me. That was before she called me a failure. That was before you offered to get me a job in data entry." I looked at my grandfather. "This isn't just about a lie on a resume, is it, Grandpa?" He looked back at me, his old eyes sharp. "No, Aaron, it's not." "This is about 10 years of whispers," I said, turning back to the crowd. 10 years of being the family joke. 10 years of poor Aaron. All while I was building a company that is currently worth more than every single house in this neighborhood combined. All while I was creating hundreds of real jobs. Jobs that, ironically, Jason, you weren't qualified to hold. The first confrontation was over. The truth about the resume was out. But the real case, the one I had been building for a decade, was just beginning. The atmosphere on the patio was no longer celebratory. It was a courtroom. And Aunt Carol, realizing she had lost the battle over Jason's brilliance, shifted her tactics. If she couldn't win on facts, she would try to win on emotion. She went for the one person she thought was still on her side. "Arthur, you can't let her do this," she wailed, turning to my grandfather. She's ruining him. She's doing it out of spite, because she's jealous. Look at her. She's cold. She's not normal." She was right about one thing. The stakes were escalating, but they weren't escalating for me. They were escalating for her. I held up my hand. "Aunt Carol, I told you to stop talking. You're not helping him." "Aaron," Grandfather Arthur said, his voice cutting in. He ignored his daughter. He was focused on me. "What, exactly, does your company do?" This was the opening. This was the moment to build the case. "We're a logistics and security firm," I said, my voice crisp and professional. "But that's a simple way of putting it. We're a solutions company. When a shipping conglomerate's entire container system is hacked and held for ransom, they call me. When a new bank's online security protocol fails a stress test and they're facing billions in liability ties, they call me. When the Department of Defense needs a secure, encrypted network to coordinate a new global supply chain, they call me." I let that last part sink in. My uncle, the one who worked for the post office, visibly gulped. "We have offices in New York, London, Tokyo, and Zurich," I continued. "We employ over 800 people, not including contractors. And yes, last year our valuation topped $9 billion. A woman in the back, one of my cousins, fainted, just buckled at the knees and went down. No one moved to help her. They were all staring at me as if I had just grown a second head. 9 billion, my mother breathed, her eyes as wide as saucers. Aunt Carol just shook her head, a strange, high-pitched laugh bubbling up from her chest. "Lies, more lies, you're pathological, you're making it all up. Jason, she's making it up, isn't she?" But Jason wasn't listening. He was staring at the ground, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. He knew. He had seen the internal company branding. He had seen the budgets for the strategy department he was joining. He knew, better than anyone, that I wasn't lying. "It's true," he whispered. The orientation materials, the non-disclosure agreement, it mentioned federal contracts. I thought it was just, boilerplate." Aunt Carol's face turned an astonishing shade of purple. "You idiot," she screamed at her son. "You believed her." It's not a matter of believing, Carol, I said. It's a matter of public record, for anyone who knows where to look. This was the second confrontation, not with threats but with irrefutable proof. You see, I said, walking back toward my grandfather, you've all been operating under a misconception. You thought I was the one who was lost. You thought I was the one who needed saving. The truth is, I've been the one holding the safety net for this family for years, and you never even knew it. I looked at my grandfather. Grandpa, your furniture business. That miracle private loan you got 6 years ago to save the mill from foreclosure, after the banks all turned you down. The one from that anonymous benefactor who wanted to preserve local craftsmanship. His face went white, he gripped his cane. You. I nodded. It was the first big check I ever wrote. My father loved that mill. I wasn't going to let it die. I turned to my Uncle Mike, the postman. Uncle Mike, your daughter, my cousin Sarah, that full-ride scholarship to medical school, the one from the Vance Education Trust. He looked at me, his mouth agape. There is no Vance Education Trust, I said softly. I'm the trust. I've paid for her tuition, her books, and her housing for the last 6 years. She graduates top of her class in May. I looked around the patio, at my cousin who had fainted and was now being helped up. At my cousin Amy, who just bought her first house, that first-time homebuyer's grant that matched her down payment, that was me. I finally turned back to Aunt Carol, whose face was a mask of disbelief and horror. And you, Aunt Carol, you most of all. I never took a dime from you, she spat. You didn't, I agreed. But your husband did, his real estate business. It didn't miraculously recover after the 2008 crash. It was bankrupt. I bought out his debt through a shell corporation. This house, I said, gesturing to the beige stucco monstrosity, this car, Jason's allowance that let him pretend to be a big shot for 10 years, I own all of it. Your husband's company has been a subsidiary of Vance Meridian for the past decade. He's been, in effect, my employee. The silence was absolute. This was the final, irrefutable proof. This was the moment that broke the spell. Jason, who had been listening to all of this with a look of growing, agonizing shame, finally looked up. He didn't look at me. He looked at his mother. You knew, he whispered. You knew we were, that dad. Aunt Carol stammered for the first time in her life, utterly defeated. I wanted you to be proud. Proud, Jason's voice cracked, and a single hot tear rolled down his cheek. You made me a joke, you made me a fraud, all this time, she, Erin, was paying for everything. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a decade of wasted pride. They all think I'm a visionary, a leader, and you've just been paying my bills. He turned and pushed past his mother, past the stunned crowd, and ran into the house. The sound of the front door slamming shut echoed across the patio like a gunshot. The party was over. People were frozen, glasses in hand, staring at the empty space where Jason had been. The air was thick with the wreckage of a decade of lies. Aunt Carol, her face ashen, turned on me. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian hate. You, she hissed. You did this. Why? Oh, monster, you planned this. You came here to destroy my son, to destroy me. No, Aunt Carol, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. You're wrong. I didn't plan this. You did. You planned this whole party. You sent the invitation. You gathered the audience. You wrote the script. You called me a failure, a loser, and unlike some people. You handed me the microphone and begged me to tell the truth. I looked around at the faces of my family. My stunned mother, my ashamed uncle, my grandfather who was watching me with an entirely new expression, not of pride, not of shock, but of recognition. He was finally seeing me. I didn't come here to destroy anyone, I said, my voice resonating with a clarity that felt new. I came here because my mother asked me to. I came here hoping, for one afternoon, that I could just be Erin, just part of the family, but you wouldn't let me. I walked over to the table and picked up my bag. I'm not a monster, Aunt Carol. I'm a CEO, and I have to make a business decision. I turned to my uncle, her husband. "Uncle Frank," I said. He winced. "My legal team will be in touch with you on Monday. We're going to be dissolving your division. It's not profitable, and it's become a liability." You're firing me," he whispered. "I'm liquidating an asset," I said, my voice firm. "What you do with your half of the proceeds is your business, but this arrangement is over. This house, the cars, it all gets sold." "You can't," Carol shrieked. "This is my home." "No," I said, turning to her for the last time. "It was my asset, and you, Aunt Carol, have just proven to be a very, very bad investment." I left her there, sputtering, and walked to my grandfather. He stood tall, his hands clasped on his cane. "Aaron," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Grandpa," I replied just as softly. He reached out a work-roughened hand and placed it on my shoulder. "Your father, he would be." He stopped, swallowing hard. "He was proud of you. I am proud of you. I am just so very sorry that I was too blind to see you." "It's okay, Grandpa," I whispered. "I'm still here." "I know," he said, "and you, my girl, are a Vance, through and through." I smiled, a real smile. "No, Grandpa, I'm a Morgan too. I'm both." I gave him a kiss on the cheek and turned to my mother, who was crying silently. I took her hand. "Come on, Mom, let's go home." As we walked away, past the stunned, silent family members, I heard my grandfather's voice boom out one last time. "Carol," he said, and the ice in his voice was enough to freeze the pool. "You have dishonored this family, you have shamed your son, and you have insulted the one person who has held us all together. You will apologize to her. And then, you and I are going to have a long talk about the Vance family and the Morgan family." We didn't stay to hear her reply. As my mother and I walked down the street to my car, she squeezed my hand. "A $9 billion company, Aaron," she whispered, her voice full of awe. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," I said, unlocking the doors to my unassuming sedan. "I didn't think you'd believe me, and I guess I just wanted you to be proud of me, Mom, not my bank account." She stopped, pulled me into a fierce hug, right there on the sidewalk. "Oh, my baby," she cried. "I have always been proud of you. Always. I didn't have the words to fight your aunt." "It's okay, Mom," I said, hugging her back. "I found them." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "I am so sorry, Aaron, for everything. I didn't know. I'm a fool. Is there anything I can do to make this right? Jason." I looked at the text. This was the moment of reconciliation, the final, triumphant action. I typed back a reply. "You can start by telling your mother the truth, and then you can start over. Go get your degree, for real this time. Apply to my company in 4 years. We have an excellent internship program. You'll have to start in data entry." I hit send. A moment later, a reply. "Thank you, I will." I smiled. Maybe there was hope for him yet. The downfall of Aunt Carol was not as dramatic as a movie. It was, in many ways, quieter and more complete. As I had predicted, my legal team was ruthlessly efficient. The dissolving of her husband's subsidiary was quick. The house was sold within a month. A short sale. As it turned out, I had been the sole creditor. They were forced to move into a small condominium on the other side of town. My Uncle Frank, surprisingly, thrived. Freed from the pressure of his wife's expectations, he took his half of the liquidation and got a simple job at a local hardware store. My mother said she ran into him, and he looked happier and 10 years younger. Aunt Carol, on the other hand, did not. She became a social ghost. The family she had tried to impress had all been witnesses to her. Humiliation. The pride she had built her life around was gone, replaced by the crushing reality of her own poor character. She had lost her house, her status, and, most importantly, her audience. Jason, true to his word, disappeared. He sent me one final email, a formal letter of apology that was copied to my grandfather and my mother. In it, he took full responsibility for the resumed fraud, for his arrogance, and for the years he had spent mocking me. He announced he had enrolled in community college and was getting a job to pay for it himself. It was the most impressive thing he had ever done. My relationship with my grandfather, Arthur Morgan, was transformed. He started calling me every Sunday, not to check up on me, but to talk. He'd ask about my business, about logistics and cybersecurity. He told me stories about my father I had never heard. He came to my office, walked through the floors, and looked at the bustling but quiet analysts with a look of profound respect. He finally understood that my work, like his, was about building something real. My mother, for her part, became my biggest champion. She took great delight in telling the story to anyone who asked, though her version was much kinder than mine. In her telling, I was a quiet genius who had saved the family. It was embarrassing, but also nice. The full and final resolution came 6 months later, at Thanksgiving. It was held at my grandfather's house, the first time in years. Aunt Carol and Uncle Frank were there. They looked smaller. Carol tried to avoid my eye, but I walked directly over to her. "Aunt Carol," I said. She flinched. "Aaron, you look well." "So do you," I said, which was a lie. I hope you're settling in." She looked at me, and for the first time I saw something other than pity or rage in her eyes. I saw nothing. She was just a tired woman. "It's quiet," she said. "Good," I replied. "Listen, my company's charitable trust, the one that's real," I added with a small smile, "is looking for a new administrator. It's mostly paperwork. Managing the grants for the scholarships, like the one Sarah has. It's a job if you're interested." She stared at me, her mouth open. You'd give me a job." "It's a chance to do some actual good, Aunt Carol," I said. "To rebuild, to actually be proud of something. It's your choice." I didn't wait for an answer. I walked away, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders I hadn't even known I was carrying. Later, as we were all sitting down to dinner, my grandfather stood up. He raised his glass. "This year," he said, his voice thick, "I am thankful for many things, for my family, for our health, but most of all, I am thankful for clarity." He looked right at me. For too long, we in this family have valued the noise of success, the loud brags, the shiny toys. We were fools. We forgot what both our names, Vance and Morgan, truly stand for: integrity, hard work, and building things that last. He raised his glass higher. "To my granddaughter, Erin, who, in her quiet, persistent, and brilliant way, never forgot, she is the best of all of us. She is the new standard. To Erin." "To Erin," the room echoed. I looked around the table. At my mother, weeping openly. At my uncle, smiling a real smile. At Jason, who had texted me a simple, "Happy Thanksgiving, boss." And at Aunt Carol, who was looking at her plate, but who raised her glass just a fraction of an inch. It was peace. It was vindication. My little computer hobby hadn't just made me a millionaire. It had given me the power to save my family, to expose a fraud, and, finally, to rewrite my own story. And as I raised my glass, I knew deep in my bones that my father would have been so proud.